Hi. Well, we're going to take a bit of a jump now from this very broad perspective of the ERI project to my own work. And I have been, over the last few years, digitizing and collecting online and creating a website to tell the story of every single person who was deported from the Channel Islands during the Second World War, during German occupation. And I'm going to talk to you about how the website tells the story in detail of everyone, whether they were deported because they were Jewish or deported because they were other kinds of victims of Nazism, because they were political prisoners. So I'm just going to start off, first of all, by, in fact, I'm going to go straight to my website, actually. So there's no point in even opening my PowerPoint. Right. Can everyone see the website? Vicky, can you give me a thumbs up if you're looking at the website? Fantastic. Okay, well, this is the website that I created with money from the EVZ Foundation in Berlin, and it's called the Frank Falla website, and it's named after the gentleman you can see at the top here, who was a man from Guernsey who helped to work on an underground newspaper during the German occupation, and he and his colleagues were informed upon and deported, and two of his colleagues died in Nazi prisons. So what this website allows us to do is I'm going to take you on some sort of stories here. I'm going to take you on little adventures to show you what the website does, but I'm going to start off with an overview. So it has the name, and this, by the way, is a comprehensive website. It has the details of everybody who was deported, everybody I found so far, and so I must be at sort of 98-99% having found everyone. And it brings together all of the archives relating to those people from the Channel Islands, from London, from Germany, from everywhere where they went on their journey of different prisons and camps. So first of all, before we dive into it, let me give you that overview. So here's the list of names. We have a list of the 125 different Nazi prisons, forced labor camps and concentration camps to which people were sent. I have a couple of maps. So we have, first of all, a couple of seconds while it loads. Here we go. So we've got our map of Europe here. This is an interactive map, and each of these different triangles shows a concentration camp or forced labor camp or prison to which people were sent. So you can click on each of those and read more. We also have our map of the Channel Islands to show from where different people were deported. So if I just zoom in on this, there's a little bit of a time lag here. Oh, heck, I don't know what we're doing in Italy here. Let me scroll in on this. I'm doing this with my fingers on my screen to hopefully be a little faster. So the idea of doing a pin of the address, let's go to Guernsey first of all, of each person who was deported, is that this can be used as an educational tool in schools. So let's say school kids are wanting to learn about who from their parish, and the Channel Islands are divided up into parishes. So who from their parish was deported, who on their street was deported, they can click and find out a person and then follow their story. So we'll do that in just a second. Just to show you some of the other things on the website before we go in, there's the story of Frank Falla here, who was the man after whom the website is named. We'll come back to him in a tick. Also on the website, I have news and blog, just showing my latest publication, information about the different memorials in the Channel Islands to these groups. There's a resistance trail in Jersey, which I created in cooperation with Jersey Heritage Trust. And this sort of is a series of little videos about various sites to do with resistance. There's also one for Guernsey, which I recently filmed. There's also educational materials on here. So as I say, this website was created with schools partially in mind. so that teachers could learn about the stories of various, here I've got various Jewish people who were deported from the islands and various political prisoners, and sort of questions for the classroom. So let me start then by diving in at someone on this list. And I'm going to start off with one of the more famous Channel Islanders to be deported, and this is Harold Ledroulinek. And Harold Ledroulinek was implicated in helping to look after an escaped Russian slave worker who had escaped from their labor camp in the island. And Harold was deported along with his sister. Now, his sister was sent to Ravensbrück, where she died, but Harold was sent to Bergen-Belsen, which he survived. And he is said to be, at the point of liberation of the camp, the only surviving British person. This is what was, he became sort of famous throughout the UK for being the only surviving British person at the liberation of the camp. But whether that's an exactly true claim hasn't yet been established. But let me talk you through a typical entry on the Frank Falla archive website and the kind of documents that have been brought together that either I personally have paid to be digitized, or I've got funding to pay for them to be digitized. So the website starts off with some basic information about the person here, about their address and when they died. You can click on the address and go to that place on the map of Jersey to see where this person's from. Here is the series of different prisons and camps that he was sent to. So you can click, as I'll do just for a second, you can click on any of these to find out a profile about the camp. And this profile of information, along with photographs and a little map of where it is here, the information about the camp is also supplemented with testimonies of Channel Islanders who are in these places. So the website then goes on to give a biography, a wartime biography of each person who was deported. So here we have Harold's. There's also some thumbnails of documents here, and these include, let's have a look. We've got the registration, the occupation registration card of Harold. We've got basically here, these are his when he was sentenced by the German court martial. This is his little record saying what his sentence was. We've got other photographs of him. Now, Harold was a very interesting character because he, having survived several concentration camps, he spoke at 3 different war crimes tribunals after the war. And being an educated man, he was a headmaster. He was very eloquent and able to describe very well what the experience was at these camps. And he also narrated his own story in a radio documentary after the war. And he also spoke just before the King's Speech, the annual King's Speech in 1946 as well. So he sort of got a lot of publicity for his story then. And I also want to show you some of the other key files that I have on this website. So as well as a lot of documents from Arolsen Archives, or the International Tracing Service, as it used to be called. So I collected all of those records from the Wiener Library. So, for every person who is deported, they can see those records. There are also the compensation claims testimonies. So I don't know how many of you are aware that in 1964, an agreement was signed with the West German government where British victims of Nazi persecution could get compensation for the amount of time they spent in a concentration camp and the degree of disability. And they had to write a testimony of their experience. And so I digitized all of these documents and put them on there. So really anyone who wants to get a good sense of the story of Channel Islanders, it's all there on this website. And here's a little map at the bottom of each person's entry, and you can click on this map. It's an interactive map to show the journey across Europe that the person took. And again, you can just click on any one of these and find out more. So really what I wanted to talk about, and I know I've got very limited time, so I'm just going to quickly move to Teresa Steiner, who is perhaps one of the better known three Jewish women who were deported from Guernsey and died in Auschwitz. And there's her story here, along with her records from the Arlson archives. Of course, she didn't survive to write a testimony after the war. And here's a little map showing her journey. So it's a very interactive website. And although the Channel Islands are small places, and I'm just going to stop sharing at this point. We can go back to it later. The Channel Islands are very small places, and I'm aware of that. And because of the smallness, they've been overlooked a lot in terms of, I suppose, the historiography of the Holocaust and of German occupation. And I've written a number of books over the last decade, which I hope will change that. But I think one of the more important things of this all singing, all dancing, all records that survive in Europe about each person, all being collected in one place. I think the value is that it gives us this microcosm, if you like, of occupied Europe, so that you can, it's almost like you can imagine if somehow we managed to tell the story of a whole shtetl of somewhere in Eastern Europe, and we were able to find out the story of every single occupant in that village. It's a way of relating the very small to the very large, and so for me this is a really good case study of how digitized resources can bring back to life small communities, and it gives something back to that community. Because I should say that over the 2 years that I spent writing this website, when I was, so there's about 220 entries online, and I've been contacted by families in Australia, America, Canada, New Zealand, across the world, who say, oh, you've got my grandmother's story online. I never knew her story. Thank you so much. I also have this record. I have a photograph of her. Here it is for the website. And that's been brilliant to really supplement the website through this crowdsourcing, I guess, but also so many people from the Channel Islands, and I'm sure across Europe, who were deported, never spoke of their story, or perhaps told the next generation just a tiny part of their story because they didn't want to traumatize the next generation. And time again, I have been told so often by families in the Channel Islands how happy they are to have their story, to have their history given back to them, because it's like this layer of history was missing from the Channel Islands. This is an untold story, or at least it was before I did this work, and it's been able to give that story back to people, and especially to people who cannot take the journeys that I've taken to archives across Europe to collect this material. That information is sort of there and ready waiting for them. So in terms of sort of the key question the Vicky's posed here of what can digitization and what can digital technologies really contribute to what we know of the Holocaust? Well, it gives back a history to those who, I won't say who were robbed of it, perhaps who were robbed of it. I mean, there are some people who say, well, my grandmother was at such and such prison, and I don't know the experience of a British person in this prison. Well, they can read on my website the experience of other British people, and I'm flagging up British people because in my own research, I've this research has enabled me to actually to write a history of the British experience of Nazi prisons and concentration camps, and it's actually a very interesting story because Brits were treated differently, and sometimes they were targeted for particular bullying because, you know, Britain was still a fighting force in the Second World War and wasn't occupied apart from the Channel Islands. But I'm digressing a little, but I think there's a very particular narrative that this website is able to tell. So one thing I would say about this work is because I've been, you know, the expert with the knowledge in this area, it's been, you know, although I had a research assistant in Berlin who was able to carry out some research on the prisons and camps for me, in terms of the stories of each individual person, it's been me personally who has done that research. And I think that if I fell under a bus, I don't know who would be able to carry that on, because after so many years of research in this area, there are really not many people out there I can think of only one or two who might be able to carry on this work. So I think some of the challenges are the very specific knowledge that the researchers themselves carry in their heads. So, you know, one of the other questions that Vicky asked was that do digital archives enhance or limit users' relationships with particular documents? And I think for me, I know my website has been able to very much enhance the not just the relationship, but actually, in you know, it almost sounds like too much to say enhance the lives of the generations that will come after, who perhaps have had a very difficult personal relationship with the person who went through Nazi camps or prisons and came out the other end and was very traumatized. And I've had a lot of interviews with people who have spoken about the post-traumatic stress disorder that their loved one had suffered, the way in which that person who had survived camps wasn't able to show love, or became a very violent person after the war, or caused all sorts of dysfunctional relationships within the family. And through learning the experience of that person, they were able to finally, I don't know, come to terms with or forgive or learn to understand the experience that person had. So I think, you know, I know 1,000 different ways in which my website has helped people and has given back people their history. So I know I'm on a time budget, so I should probably stop there. Although, Vicky, I haven't had a watch in front of me, so I do apologize if I've gone over my limit. But you know, I'm sure we'll pick up with this later on to keep chatting about it. But I think this sort of way of telling the story of the Holocaust or Nazi persecution is very powerful. So I'm a big fan of what digitization and digital websites like this can do. So I'll stop there. Thank you.